Hi, this is Kit. I'm about to do a video recording of a hive inspection and an oxalic acid dribble treatment for my top bar beehive. There's not a lot of information about treating with an oxalic acid dribble with a top bar hive, so I did a lot of reviewing different websites as well as doing a little bit of literature review in order to compile this method. What I'm doing is basically a hive inspection. I'm capturing and caging my queen. I'm going to keep her in the hive so that her pheromones are present in the hive so they hopefully don't start building emergency queen cells and that process, but she will be basically forced to not lay eggs, so it's going to be inducing a brood break. It's September right now, so we're starting to hit the end of my nectar flow here in Colorado. And what else did I want to share? I'm going to be treating with an oxalic acid dribble using the recipe that's found on Honeybee Suite. So there's a nice page on how to do that. So I'm following the method from that site, and I'm going to be starting with that in this video. I'm going to be treating 3 times with 7 days apart from each treatment, and that is to account for the presence of capped drone brood. So drones take a few days longer to emerge from their capped cells compared to adult female worker bees, and that's why mites tend to prefer drone cells. So the timing of this, based on, again, a lot of research online, is 7 days apart 3 times. So it's going to be a total of 14 days. And then on the 14th day, I'm going to allow my queen to go back and re-enter the hive. And so at that point, hopefully I'll have a really strong reduction in my mites. And then I will consider treating in the middle of the winter on one of our warm Colorado days in the middle of the winter to do this one more time while brood is not present in the hive, just to, again, do another mite treatment. With a top bar hive, you cannot easily remove all the honey, so it's not like honey supers with a Langstroth, so I am treating with some honey present. Since I'm a hobbyist, I'm not selling my honey at all. It sounded like mostly it's for taste, and a lot of people said it doesn't actually interfere with the taste of the honey. And the location that I'm treating is over the brood. I'm not treating on honeycomb. And again, this is trying to port a method there's strong information about Langstroth hives using this, but not a lot with top bar. So that's why I'm recording this, in hopes that it helps other people. You can at least learn from my mistakes as I share them. So this is going to be my first treatment, and I will try to put together videos of subsequent treatments, but those will be in another 7 days and then another 14 days. So I wanted to get this out as soon as possible over Labor Day weekend. If you have questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try to address as best I can. Now, cheers, enjoy my video. Hi, this is Kit again, and here commences my video recording. I wanted to show a still of the wood bleach, which is, of course, oxalic acid. I have that circled on that image. This is the syringe that I'm going to be using to apply that oxalic acid dribble. 50 milliliters is important. And this is all, this is me doing the oxalic acid treatment. That's going to be later in the video. This is all from the Honeybee Suite website, so I've really followed their method for everything. So I wanted to share the wood bleach. That lid is tight, so I used a bottle opener to try to prise open the sides and then very carefully prise the lid off. There's no safety barrier on this, so if you were to hit it with a lot of force, you could fling oxalic acid crystals everywhere. Now, this, of course, uses 3 components. There's oxalic acid crystals, that wood bleach. I'm getting 17.5 grams of that because I'm halving the recipe that's on Honeybee Suite because I only have really 1 hive to treat, so I don't need a whole lot, just 3 treatments of 1 hive. There's going to be 300 milliliters of distilled water, distilled just so that all the chemical properties of tap water are removed. There's that syringe again, showing that off. And then it's going to be 300 grams of sugar. So it's a 1-for-1 sugar solution syrup that the oxalic acid crystals are dissolved into. And from what I read, it's just a better delivery method than plain water with the oxalic acid
crystals diluted. So I'm bringing the water up in temperature a little bit because that's the instructions. The other thing I'm doing is I'm going to create a test batch of just simple syrup without oxalic acid crystals. And that is detailed on the Honeybee Sweet website as well. It's just recommended to try the syringe with the simple syrup rather than just straight water because the viscosity of the simple syrup is different than just with water. And it's helpful to get a handle on how that feels. So I decided I'd follow that method. So I'm dissolving the oxalic acid crystals in that jar. So that jar is going to be the simple syrup with the oxalic acid. I'm adding the sugar now. And because this is just a one-on-one, it's not like a super saturated solution, with the warm water, the sugar crystals are going to dissolve quite easily. So while that just kind of sits without over stirring it, you don't want to like shake it or anything, I'm doing my test solution with the syringe. So I'm just practicing like 5 milliliter delivery at a time. And I can share, I've done all this in the past. I've already treated my hive. I was a little bit gentle and timid with my delivery of the 5 milliliters in the frames. Like I was delivering a little bit less. And so I had to go back and deliver a little bit more because I got to the end of the 10 and I still had like a substantial portion of the oxalic acid dribble remaining. So you'll kind of see me do that twice later on here in the video. So the oxalic acid is completely dissolved in this jar. I'm labeling it right away because you do not want to make a mistake. This is a chemical that you want to take care of with. So here's all my tools. I got a smoking smoker. That's my cage for my queen. There's my queen catcher. There is the oxalic acid, and I have the pre-loaded syringe with 50 milliliters. That's like the upper limit of what you want to use on a hive basis, according to the literature. There's my stuff for a sugar roll mite count. And I also have these painter's markers you can use to mark a queen. And I've always chickened out from marking my queens, and I did that this time as well. So you can see this is my setup. I have my smoker underneath my screen. I smoked kind of at the entrance, but I'm just letting the smoke come up. I've found that with these carny bees that it's really beneficial to just give them a little bit of light smoking, that they really calm down quite a lot. Here is just my hive. You can see those like white labels. That's how I keep track of what is happening in my hive between inspections. So I know like where there's brood, where there's honey, if there's drone, and then I just kind of strike things out as things change, and that allows me to see how my hive is changing. So we had like a major brood, I guess, bursting from the seams, and the brood nest has contracted quite a lot. So here I'm popping out that follower board. That's very important for top bar beehives, because if you didn't have that, there'd be nothing to stop them from filling every single bar with comb, with wax, and that comb can be bonded to the side. That's what that little hook tool that I was sort of cleaning in the beginning, that helps me cut any bonded comb, wax comb from the side that is hanging underneath these top bars. If I didn't cut that loose, especially on hot days, it's a risk that I could actually tear the top bar from the wax comb and leave it in the hive. And I did that in my very first year beekeeping, and it was quite the ordeal. If anyone's interested in understanding how I handled that situation, just leave a comment, because I could put together a video with some of the photos I have from that time, with how I went about fixing that huge error. But at this point, working a top bar hive, it's just a habit to use this hook. You just free the comb, and it tends to just be the top. And then the other thing it tends to be, when you have an established hive with older wax, the wax is just a little bit firmer compared to like wax that is virginal and just freshly drawn out. On honeycomb, that's when my bees tend to secure the actual comb and wax to the side of my hive. It's structural support for them on the exceptionally heavy filled honeycomb. So when I'm going into my hive, I have my labels that help me identify what I had in that bar the last time I inspected. But if I'm going and I'm going up the side like this, and I encounter some resistance toward the top where they've bonded to the side, it actually helps me know that I'm likely to be encountering relatively full honeycomb in that bar. So I'm speeding up the footage, so the sound of the bees is going to be a little bit cartoonish during that portion, but you can still get a feel for how the bees are responding to the things that I'm doing. That's why I'm leaving the sound on, is so that you can really experience, like, some things agitate them more than others, and you can hear that with their buzzing. So this portion, which is actually the back of the hive, this tends to be the honeycomb, and where they're putting in like pollen and honey and things like that, storage. And that's where I harvest most of my honey. Carney bees, these ones have been just insanely productive for honey. I've never harvested so much honey as I have had this year from these carney bees. So I'm going through and I'm just eyeballing. You can see when I rotate it on the like bias of the top bar. There, I shook off the bees so you can get a nice look on that filled capped honey. It looks beautiful. So I'm just identifying what is in some of these right now. And I would take notes during the season about what bars I thought would be ready for harvest, and just would kind of asterisk them so that I could easily find them to harvest them through the season. Now that I've gotten through all of the honeycomb, I'm actually now in the brood nest. You can see the darkness of that comb on the bottom. That's because a lot of brood has been laid and hatched out of those cells. You know, it's got a lot of cocooning set down, so it's very dark. And I have a flashlight here. My flashlight wasn't working, so I actually had to go back in and get another one from the house. I need a flashlight to look inside of those cells, those uncapped brood cells, because I want to be able to see what is happening, like what stage those eggs or larvae or pupa or whatever is in prior to when they're capped. And I'm making notes of that, especially because I'm about to induce a brood break, and I want to be able to keep an eye on like where each of these bars should be, like the stage they ought to be in as I go back in for subsequent treatments. And I'm also, on all of the brood frames, I'm looking for my queen. So I'm being very meticulous because I want to capture and cage my queen. And I'm also going to do a sugar roll. And I do prefer to find my queen prior to doing a sugar roll so I don't accidentally somehow, include my queen in a mite count sugar roll. That's a little bit of a nightmare of mine, and probably many a beekeeper share that. So that's what I'm doing through here is I'm looking at these brood frames, looking for my brood frames, brood top bars. I'm looking for my queen, and then I'm also looking inside of any uncapped brood comb to like see where the bees are at. So I'm speeding up the video again, and they're pretty mellow through all of this. You know, they get a little bit excited as I prize each bar out because they're like, what's going on? All the ones that are in that particular seam get a little bit agitated, but they're overall not too bad. They're pretty compliant through this process of just, taking a look at them, not doing a whole lot to the bar except lifting it up and putting it back again. So as it turns out, my queen isn't for quite a few more bars. I found her toward the end of the brood. I have about 10 frames of brood. And that is beneficial because the 50 milliliters, they recommend, and this is again based on a Langstroth, which has 10 frames. So it's a little different in a top bar. They recommend 5 milliliter applications per seam of bees. And so I'm trying to just treat around my brood. And I know I'm going to miss some bees that are not present in the brood area. That's just something I'm going to have to accept. I'm not going to get rid of every single mite. I'm just trying to eliminate a lot of mites prior to the brood nest really contracting and preparing for winter. So again, this is September, so I have a few more months where I think my queen's going to be laying, and I want to keep her in the hive as strong as possible going into winter. And then I probably will do this again in the heart of winter on a nice day when it's not too cold. I'll just treat again in the middle of the winter when there's no brood. overall, I gave myself 2 hours to do this entire thing, but it probably took me maybe a little bit over an hour to do all of this. And that includes quite a lot of walking back and forth to fetch this or that. And I cut those segments out of the video so you didn't have to like sit through them, but it really didn't take me all that much time. I'm only speeding up the footage to be double speed, so it's not crazy fast like some of my videos can be. But it kind of gets us through this process of pulling out a frame of brood, you know, one of those top bars with brood in it, taking a look, noting if it's uncapped, what stage they're in, and looking for my queen. That's like the repetitive process again and again and again through this section of my hive. I don't know if anyone saw in the beginning, I have my hive placed so that's underneath the overhanging branches of a deciduous tree, and it's facing like a fence that I have in the middle of my property that a previous owner built, and it basically becomes a fly barrier, which is required by my jurisdiction. But this has been just a beautiful location. I've had a hive in a different location and it did not do well in my yard. This one's been great. And again, I mentioned earlier, like as I'm going through and I'm cutting any wax that's bonded to the side of the hive, I'm cutting that free before I loosen the overall bar with my hive tool, and that I very rarely anymore encounter bonded comb when I'm in my brood area, and it's a lot lighter when you're dealing with comb that contains brood. And I think structurally up here, this will be the bar which I find my queen on. I slowed the footage down, so you know I'm gonna find my queen here. The brood comb, like the wax, and because of all of the cocooning that's happened over time, I find it much firmer than honeycomb that has never contained brood, and I think that's part of the reason why they don't need to bond the sides of the comb to the hive for extra structural support, because it's a stronger like comb because it's older, it's got that cocoon layering, and yep, I just found her. So I'm gonna point her out. You can see by the trail behind her, there's like this little trail that forms behind the queen. The queen is very fast, and she tends to leave that little trail in her wake as she's moving across the comb. So I'm going to fetch my queen catcher. As I was saying, you know, the brood bars are not often bonded to the actual frame, so it's more of just going through the motions and not necessarily cutting anything for free. So I'm showing you how that works. There's this little retracting soft plastic cage, and the spacing there is such that it's big enough for a worker to get through, but not big enough for a queen. And the purpose of that queen catcher is really for marking, and I have thought about marking my queens, and I always chicken out. I had a friend actually who marked a queen and her bees swarmed and killed it. And so that's always given me a little bit of pause. I'm pointing out the queen. You might, if you're experienced as a beekeeper, be able to see her elongated body here in the video, but she's in there and she cannot escape, but her attendants can kind of get to her to like see what's going on and to not go hysterical. So I have her, and I'm going to eventually put her into a cage, but from here on out I'm going to do my sugar roll. So I need to find a bar that has comb that is capped brood. So I'm going to find that in a couple of bars here, and I'm going to need that for my sugar roll. And eventually I'm going to have my queen walk into the cage that I have laying there, and it's quite actually successful. It takes me a while because I was trying to get some workers to just go in there with her, just, you know, extra insurance maybe to make sure she'd be cared for, but I couldn't get a worker to go in, so you'll see that in a little while. All right, there's my capped comb, so it's covered in bees for a sugar roll again. So I'm just using my non-smoking smoker because the smoke burned out, just to kind of get a little bit of the bees out of the way. That's my container I'm going to shake them in. I have my jar with the screen on top all ready, and then I have a half cup. That's the portion that's the device you'll need in order to get that 300 bees. It's 300 bees per half cup. So you shake them into the box and just kind of get them around. I need to make sure I have my jar ready for them, for the scooper. Give myself a half cup and I get them in there. And then they can't escape and I can put the sugar on them. So last year in my video, I like way overdid it with the sugar. You really only need like 2 tablespoons of sugar. So I drowned those girls in sugar. I'm sure they were quite annoyed and it probably is not great for them, but you just really need the 2 tablespoons of sugar. So I'm sort of using my cup device to eyeball 2 tablespoons to get them in there. And bees are just flying into that sugar. Well, got it in there. And then you just kind of get them mixed in with that sugar, and the idea is that they're going to clean themselves because they're not going to like that powdered sugar all over them. And then as they're cleaning themselves, they're going to dislodge mites, and then the mites will be small enough that I can shake them out like in a few minutes when I do my mite count. So that is my super black comb. You can see this is really old. There's actually like this ripple on the bottom. It's so old. It's probably one of my most original bars. I've been trying to position this so that I can hopefully get them to stop laying in it and then clean it out, because it's, part of the process with top bar beekeeping is that you can restructure like the hive to maintain like some level of hygiene, and so that's something that you can try to do. And I just haven't been able to get that one out, but it's really old. It's super black because it's had so many babies in it. So I'm using my queen cage from last year. There's a hole in it I had to remove kind of a marshmallow cork from. And so it's a hole that's big enough that my queen can just walk in. And I was sharing earlier, she literally just walked straight in, like right away. So she's in there now, and I'm trying to get other workers to go in there with her. So she goes into the cage, checks it out, and is like, I don't like this. And then she goes back out the hole because she's trying to find a way to escape. She's so fast. She's so smart. So she went in and out of the cage itself probably 3 times before I gave up on getting a worker to go in there with her. And I don't think I need a worker in the cage with her if she's going to remain in the hive just separated by that screen. They ought to minister to her through that screen, just like when you get a package of bees and the queen is in her own cage all by herself with no other workers. I'm making an assumption that as long as she's present in the hive with the workers and she's accessible to them, that they're going to keep her alive. And so I will find out in a week if that is the case or not, and I will share that in this video. But I just did this yesterday. So see, she went back up, but now I'm trying to get her to go down again. This whole thing was a little bit of a circus, but I can tell you, like, she went straight into that cage, and if I had just closed it, it would have taken maybe 10 seconds to do this whole process, but it wound up being quite the rigmarole of trying to shake her out with a worker bee, and she kept going in and out and in and out and in and out trying to escape, because, like any rational being, she doesn't want to be in a cage once she realized she was going into a cage. I think I'm close to giving up, and as soon as she gets into the cage, that's when I'm going to seal off the end. And then I ended up using masking tape to just secure everything, and I end up using masking tape to attach her to a virgin bar that has not had comb on it, because I'm hoping they don't do a ton of building, although I'm expecting they probably will. They usually do. When I've had a caged queen in there, they usually end up building. So you can see she's there. She's just walking around. For now, I'm going to leave her accessible to my bees. They'll be able to smell her and go check her out in the cage, and that's what kind of they remain doing. Now, the remainder of my inspection is going to be preparing for the oxalic acid dribble. So I'm going to look through the remaining bars just to like make sure that I'm accounting for everything that's going on. Oh, see, I already attached the queen to the bar. So that's going to be how she is in there. She's going to hang down. It's just some masking tape, which I had readily at hand. You could probably do it with twine or something else. I'm hoping the masking tape's okay. We'll see. Oh, actually, I'm going to do the sugar roll. So I'm going to count my mites. So they've been in there and rolling around in the sugar for quite a while. So they should have dislodged all of the mites that are clinging to them. I got a little bit of water there. So just like a pepper shaker, you just kind of shake them out. I overdid it the first shake and it kind of went off the edge. So I may have lost a mite in there. And I had a lot less mites in this hive compared to last year. So I'm going to have some video footage later that I can share like the comparative numbers, but it was a lot less this year. So I don't know if Carney bees are just more hygienic than Italians, or if I'm lucky, or if I just picked like the wrong bar and I'm undercounting them. As I shared, despite not having a lot of mites drop out of the 300 bees, I'm just going to proceed with treating them with the oxalic acid as planned. I don't think it's going to hurt, and I think, the net benefit will be hopefully sending my bees into, fall mode strong. So I'm letting the bees go and clean themselves in the bottom of the hive, and I'm even gonna just verify that I don't have any mites like that were stuck in the sugar on the bottom by adding a little bit of water, swishing it around, and then adding it to that plate. It's interesting when you do this with the sugar roll, it doesn't kill the mites, so you can see them like initially before I assume they drown. They're just like wiggling around in the water, still alive. Those stupid, horrible little things. So at this point, I don't want to like try to count they're swirling around in the water. It'd be really difficult to count at this point. So I'm going to take the plate very carefully and set it aside. So there's a photo of it. There was 9 mites. So last year I had 23. So big difference. So you can have, basically you divide it by 3 because it's 300 for a per 100 count. That'd be 3. Of course, 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then you double it to account for any that are under cap still. So that is like 6%. So that's not a high load of mites. And I think that that's been helpful as I've been keeping track of my mite drop on the bottom board, which is what I'm about to share. I have not had a bottom board during the summer because it just helps the bees manage the heat a little better. But to create a sticky board, you just use like canola spray, like Pam spray, and that it becomes basically a glue for any dropped mites. So I'm putting that under the board with like a little bit of a crack, so there's still a little bit of ventilation through the heat, because it's not super cool here yet. And that's kind of what I'm going to monitor for mite drop. So here I'm just taking a look, again verifying that what I have on the label is what's going on, so that I can identify the combs that I'm going to treat. Between the different bars I'm going to treat for oxalic acid dribble. And just looking, checking out what's going on in those uncapped cells. Taking meticulous notes. That is exceptionally helpful for top bar beekeeping because, of course, you're dealing with the entire hive is all together. It's not separated like it would be in a Langstroth. So that note keeping has been really helpful to me. My husband built me that little hook tool. He made that for me in my midway through my first year of beekeeping. The other tool I bought, I think, at a Tractor Supply store, that conventional hive tool. My husband built the stand that I'm using. He did a little bit of just drilling and welding for me, and it's a very helpful tool. So I'm getting to the very last 2 bars of the entire hive, and those have tended to always be honeycomb. So there's like some honeycomb at the very beginning, then the brood frames start and then go on for usually 10 to 15 bars, depending upon how they are in the season, and then the bees transition back to honey. So that's what I'm seeing right here is honeycomb. And I decided I'm just going to harvest these beautiful little honeycomb before I do the oxalic acid dribble. You know, just because you're not supposed to get it in contact, even though it might not even matter with the flavor. I just figured I would harvest these ones. Now, I have many partial honeycombs, like further down in the back of the hive that I went through in the beginning, as well as like a full frame of honey. And I'm not completely out of the nectar flow for my area, so I think that they'll still be able to do a little bit of work. But I figured, you know what, I'm just gonna grab these 2 and harvest them. And I have, as I shared earlier, the carney bees have been crazy productive like when it comes to making honey for me. So I've done more harvesting this year than I've ever before. So I've had like honey to actually share with neighbors and friends and such, which has been really nice. Could be like generous with honey. There's another honeycomb that I'm gonna take out. Something I wanted to share, during this time, I typically have prolific seasonal allergies, especially at the beginning of the season. And in January, I started taking just a teaspoon of my own honey in my coffee every morning, or actually afternoon technically. But I did not have allergies like in the past. It was incredible. So what they do say about trying to inoculate yourself against your like allergens, at least outdoor allergies, using honey, it really works. I am a test case to prove that its veracity. So I'm planning to do that again this year. And actually, I've just continued taking a teaspoon of honey in my afternoon coffee as a habit. So I'm excited to share that and hope that anyone that's actually a pretty significant factor to my keeping bees. Like my husband likes honey. I like honey. But I really like the idea of being able to naturally treat my allergies. So, all right, this is where I'm getting ready for the oxalic acid dribble. So I'm putting a couple of empty frames at the beginning, like of the hive, and then I'm going to put my queen. And it's a little bit of a risk to put several empty bars together in a top bar. It's a little bit of a risk because there's always a possibility that they're going to do something crazy like cross comb when they build the honeycomb. It's a possibility. I've never had it bad, but I've seen some really bad ones. And so typically what you do when you put in an empty bar, you try to put it between 2 full bars, because then that forces the bees to draw it out straight. When I started, of course, there is no wax comb. When you start out as a brand new beekeeper, you just have a big empty hive, and they have to build everything. And actually my girls built straight and true in the very beginning. And I haven't had to face like the conundrum or the possibility of cross combing since, I've not been a new beekeeper. Like I always have like remnant combs built in order to help guide my girls like with structurally building. So I haven't had to face that, but I am taking a little bit of a risk here today. Now, I just labeled exactly how many frames I'm treating and which ones. So when I go back to treat again, I'll be able to treat those same ones. And this is, again, I'm treating really the brood top bars. I've read that you can treat everything. I could go through everything and just use a little bit less oxalic acid. I've also read that like you could just use the 5 milliliters per frame and just go as far as you need to. I'm just going to be a little bit on the conservative side with this, since I feel like I'm jerry-rigging a Langstroth process for a top bar hive. I'm going to be careful. So I'm lighting my little smoker puck. I love these because, we're in a dry state. I'm always nervous about trying to actually light fuel that's going to come out in an ember and then start a fire in my neighborhood. So these are like almost like giant incense pucks. They don't last a whole lot of time, but they smoke well. They're easy to light generally, even with gloves. So I'm going to smoke the bees off the top because I want them to go down between the bars. I want them to go into the seam because that's where I'm going to be dribbling them. And so the idea is with this dribble that you're literally getting them messed up with the dribble. They're going to have to clean themselves, and therefore they're going to be spreading the oxalic acid across many little bodies, and that's going to introduce the oxalic acid to the mites. And the honeybee suite sites, they heard, it was like not quite cited by them, but they were quite certain that they heard that the mites are 100 times more sensitive to oxalic acid compared to bees. So bees could get a tummy ache, it might do a little bit of damage to them, but it's going to really devastate the mites. So I'm narrowing the seam so that when I squirt this oxalic acid dribble, that it's hitting the bees, not going straight to the bottom. I'm sure I was a little bit messy, like this was my first go. You'll see toward the end of this video that I did some spilling on the bars themselves, and anything that's spilled is basically useless because they're going to just leave it there. The oxalic acid isn't going to do anything. It has to get on the bees to work. And I mentioned way earlier, I was quite timid. So I get to the end of the 10th and I still probably have like 35, 40 milliliters of the dribble left. So I ended up going back to the beginning because I knew where I started. I marked it on the labels. I went back to the beginning. I'm about to do that here and just reapplied so that I used the 50 milliliters completely. See, that's what I'm doing here. And then as I go, I'm also like trying to reset my hive. So I'm getting the bars kind of scooched back the way they should be. The idea with the top bar is that all the top bars are closed off. I've found that it's difficult to do over time and you have to clean them occasionally, and actually that can have some negative effects that I could talk about at some point. I've just found that there's usually, because of propolis, I cannot get like a clean closure, and there's little gaps that they go in and out of. Because I have a roof over their heads, I don't think it matters all that much. It is technically more infiltration points, but I don't think it's easy to get into the roof cavity from the outside of my hive. I think it's much easier for them to get in through the entrance. I don't think that I'm creating like an access point that could lead to robbing or wasps moving in. I have a friend who keeps bees. He has lings, and he just lost a hive to wasps. He had all of these wasps that just came in, took everything over, and it devastated one of his hives. So you definitely don't want infiltration points that you're not caring for, and I don't think that my roof presents that kind of an infiltration point with my bees. So that's the end. And I'm going to use this same syringe for this season, and then I'm going to throw it away because you have to buy these in packs of like 10. So it's crazy. So I'll have plenty for years to come. I don't really need, I'm usually big into reusing, but when it comes to a chemical that I'm not super comfortable with, understanding the safety of, I would rather just throw these things away. So I'm getting my whole hive kind of set back up to close them. And I'm going to leave them for 7 days. I am going to check on the mite drop on the bottom, and I actually did that already. I didn't see, like, there was definitely some mite drops, but I've heard stories of oxalic acid treatment resulting in like crazy amounts of mites falling to the baseboard, and I didn't see that. But I also, compared to last year, I don't think I have the infestation that I had last year, like the level of infestation. So I don't know how many there are to drop. I do know that they're present. I think it's like less of an infestation. So here, just getting my camera free. I'm going to show you the labeling again. You can kind of see these are the notes I've taken as far as like what is happening. You can see I've numbered like which frames and where my 1 begins, and it counts all the way to 10. You can see where that queen was back there with the tape on the top. And so we're gonna leave them, and I'll let you guys know if everything goes terribly, terribly wrong. This is something I want to point out. I found it helpful to wear a bandana to keep the hair wisps from my face when I'm working my bees, and just wear really cool clothes. And then this is the mites. So again, there's 9 that I counted, so a lot less than last year, which is good. So again, that gives me about a 6% infestation rate. So not terrible, but I'm just going to go through my plan of treating them. I don't think it will hurt the bees, but we'll see. So I was trying to count 9. Nope, there's 9 in sign language, not 8. So everything that I'm doing is timed on the emergence of drone. So I'm going to be doing a 14-day period, and it basically takes about 14 days for any drone that were just capped today. They won't have benefited from this treatment because oxalic acid doesn't penetrate into capped brood. So I'm going to treat in another 7 days. That's going to get some of the emerged ones, but not all of them. And then by the time I hit that 14th day, that 3rd treatment, then all of the capped drone comb, the capped drone from the comb, they will have emerged. And for sure it will account for any adult workers because their cycle is done a few days earlier than drones. Oh, I did take a video. This is some of what I'm seeing on my mite or on my bottom board already. There are some mites on there, not tons, but there was some drop, and I'm just going to keep monitoring that, and I'll be doing this again in 7 days, and then 7 days again after that. So I think I'm going to try to take videos and I'll give updates, but if anyone has questions, just leave a comment. I think that the Hive Inspection from last year was a really popular video on this channel, and it might be because there's just not like a lot of top bar beekeepers that keep their top bars in the same way that I do. So I want to be a resource in full acknowledgement that I am learning new things every day, and I'm humbled by the amount of information that you can learn about bees, and how much you can continue to learn. So if you have anything to share, do that in comments as well. Thank you, and goodbye.